Now it's time for Real Talk.
Real talk.
Are you ready?
Okay, what are we talking about?
It's the Second Amendment protecting Black Americans.
Let's talk about that.
The Second Amendment, which grants the right to bear arms, has a complex history, which it comes to the Black American. Let's dive in to the topic.
A significant portion of American history, gun laws, bore the ugly taint of racism. The founding generation that wrote the Second Amendment had racist gun laws, including prohibitions on possessing or carrying firearms by Black people, whether they were free or enslaved.
A Florida law in 1825 authorized white people to enter into all Negro houses and lawfully seize and take away all such arms, weapons, and ammunition. After the Civil War, the Black Code enacted in the South made it a crime for a Black person to have a gun.
Even factually neutral laws were used in a racially discriminatory fashion. Martin Luther King Jr. was denied a concealed carry permit even after his house was firebombed. For much of American history, gun rights did not extend to Black people, and gun control was often enacted to limit access to guns by people of color.
The history of racist gun laws present a special dilemma for Second Amendment history. In traditional analysis, the long history of racist gun laws does not suggest that government today can limit guns in racial discrimination ways.
For example, some scholars have argued that modern laws that deny the right to keep and bear arms to people with felony convictions are constitutional, in part because the founding generation had laws disarming people thought to be unusually dangerous or unvirtuous, such as Black people, Native Americans, and enslaved persons.
Although clear that legislation no longer have the power to adopt racial discrimination gun laws, these scholars argue that the racist gun laws reflect a litigation and constitutional power that legislated to disarm people who are deemed either dangerous or lacking the virtue.
Even if gun laws today are not typically racially motivated, some of them likely have a racially disproportionate impact. And the history of racist gun laws serves as a reminder to try to avoid, eliminate, or at least minimize such discriminatory effects. People of color are far overrepresented among those convicted of federal firearm offenses.
According to the percent data, 70% of all defendants convicted of federal firearms offenses were minorities, even though the same communities make up only 40% of the population. The popular ban on the possession of a firearm by felons has a distinctly racial impact. Black and Latinos people are disproportionately represented among those who are convicted of felonies, made up a large share of the people prohibited from possessing firearms.
These sort of disparate impacts are likely unavoidable because gun laws tend to be criminal laws and minorities are overrepresented in the criminal process. Absent significant reform of the criminal justice system, people of color are almost certain to make up an excessive percentage of gun law violations. That should not dissuade lawmakers from adopting needed gun reforms.
As the courts look to history and tradition to determine the scope of the rights to keep and bear arms, they will have to decide how to deal with the history of racist gun laws. Legislation of the past is hardly neutral. The racist embedded is in so many gun laws reminds us that such legislation was enacted not out of the attempt to police the boundaries of the Second Amendment, but to abuse the law to protect racial privilege.
That does not mean that all gun laws ought to be immediately suspended. However, due to the text of the Second Amendment and the tradition of other gun laws that promoted public safety without racist taint, yet the history of racist gun laws also must not be forgotten. And if nothing else, it should inspire gun reform advocates and lawmakers to craft efforts to reduce gun violence without racially disproportionate impact.
Now, that's real talk.
Be sure to listen to us on the KWAY Digital Broadcast app, KWAY-DB, and guess what?
It is free.
Yes, it is. And online at www.kwaygospel.com. And we're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean Podcasts.
So please don't miss your blessings.
We'll look forward to you listening to Real Talk.